All right, good morning, everyone. As you can see, my name's Rosie Pham, and before we begin, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners. I'm currently on Boonwurrung, and Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, while living in the city of Stonnington, and I acknowledge that they are the traditional custodians of the land and waters on which we live, work, and learn. And I also pay my respects to any First Nations people who are in attendance today. So thanks everyone for joining this panel on everyday waste warriors. So I don't know about you, but that most recent IPCC report that came out a couple of weeks ago was a bit doom and gloom for me, and it did make me start. It does. Sometimes the reality of our climate, situation can feel a bit overwhelming. And I think that it would be fair to say for most of us, that question comes back over and over, like, is there a point? Is there a point to anything I'm even doing anymore? But I think for me, as the eternal optimist, my answer ends up being a resounding yes, for all sorts of different reasons. Because there is so much more to, there is so much going on all the time with everybody. And so I hope that for all of you listening, that you can see how, whether it's through business, everyday climate action, research, there are all sorts of ways we're all making a difference all the time. So I just wanted to, first of all, introduce everyone to our panel. I'm not sure if we're all the same for everyone on our screens, or if it's like Zoom, where it's different for people. So I'm just going to start with my first left to right. So Kate, do you mind introducing yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Kate. I'm coming to you today from Wurundjeri country up in the north. And I did some research on the tension between feminist consumption practices, spurred by my own purchase of a shirt that said the future is female, and the waste that created tension with my environmentalism from that. And so that's a bit about, or I'll talk a bit about that today.
Thanks, Kate. Charlotte?
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Archer, and I am the founder of Bob Hair in South Yarra, Melbourne. I started a sustainable zero waste salon 4 years ago, after having been a bit disgruntled with the amount of waste in the hair industry. Built Bob basically to have a salon that's waste-free, completely waste-free, and just uses more low-tox products, and just a bit more mindful about the partnerships that we have with certain, with our suppliers, colour companies, and retail and whatnot.
Full disclosure, I have been going to Bob for the past 3 years, and can attest it is one of the most special hairdressing experiences that you can have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, do you mind?
Sure. Morning, everyone. So I'm Tony Corrales, and I host the Producing with Purpose podcast, as the little thing below there says. And I'm also the founder of a ethical vegan fashion label called No Skin, which has been live for about 4 months now, coming to you as well from Melbourne on Wurundjeri land.
Thanks, Tony. I love how spoiled your cats are. They've got a cat flap in that prime location of the window.
Yes, you'll almost certainly see them at some point through this chat.
And last but not least, of course, Russ and Ramona.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. Ross and I are volunteers with a group called Beach Patrol Australia. Our main focus, we started back in 2009. It was to pick up rubbish off the beaches. That later expanded to picking it off the streets. And then we come to realize we can't just keep picking it up. We need to raise awareness so we create less waste to begin with.
Yeah, that's about it. So we've got 55 plus groups all around Port Phillip Bay and through the city of Melbourne, each one out picking up litter once a month for an hour. So between all of those groups, we're raising quite a bit of awareness, as well as removing quite a bit of plastic litter from the environment, stopping it getting into the bay, and we know what happens when it gets into there.
Wow. So you've been picking up rubbish before plugging made it cool.
Yes. Our first group started in 2009. So
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so just to give everyone a run through of how today's panel is going to work, I'm just going to ask each of you a question that is more tailored to you specifically because of your background or your interests. And then, of course, though, all panelists, you're all invited to join in and comment as well. But Ross and Ramona, with what you've been doing for the past 10 years, I thought I'd start with you. With everything that you've been picking up, what would you say are your top 5 plastic items that you regret have been invented?
only 5? I think the main thing is that we've somehow created this world to become, quote, disposable products because they're convenient. So anything that basically was built for a purpose of single use, that's been available to the general public. So coffee cups, food containers, cutlery, any of those plastic items, drink containers, plates, any of those things basically have no value after they've used for a short amount of time. It takes a lot of energy to produce them to begin with too, which gets us into climate and all of that as well. But they just get disposed of as waste because they have no value once they've been used for a short life. And that's when they become litter. As we probably all know, they become dangerous to our wildlife and our animals. And we use that word convenient, but I always ask, convenient for who? Because to me, just the whole introduction of single-use plastics many decades ago, I wish was never invented. And Ross, you probably have a few others you can.
Yeah, looking at some more singular items, like we find so many plastic straws, although we find less now than we did 5 years ago. But wouldn't have been uncommon to find 200 straws on 300 meters of beach. Quite common. Balloons, we find a lot of shards of balloons and the clips and the sticks that go with them. And polystyrene, from big bits of polystyrene down to the individual little beads. Some days we found 10,000 plus little bits of polystyrene, not just on one corner of a beach after a storm. I say plastic bags, but we find hardly any now compared to what we were doing years ago. The plastic bag ban really had a good effect on the environment.
But again, the product itself, I mean, we created the plastic bag and look how much harm it's done before we finally realized what it was doing and then have banned them. And they're still out there, but like Ross said, not to the same extent. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you ask that question, Ramona, about convenience, but convenience for who? Because it really goes to show, especially with plastic, that convenience invention has primarily only been for humans rather than considering the entire ecosystem. Hey.
So true. Yeah. And it not only, is not pretty to see, but it harms them. We're actually killing other animals and other creatures because of this convenient product we've created that we dispose of very incorrectly. And it brings us back to, is it really needed? Reducing waste. Why do we even have it to begin with?
Yeah,
which is probably a good discussion for this group.
Are you finding over the years then with people who volunteer with you that not only is our relationship to stuff, but our relationship to how we view ourselves in the ecosystem changes from picking up this type of litter?
I think so. I think we do work not only with our volunteers, but we have, when COVID wasn't around, we were able to do groups with do beach cleans with corporate groups as well as schools. And for most people, they don't really see litter until you show them that it's there. And then we kind of remind them that you'll never not see it again. And I think it does help make them aware of decisions, buying decisions, because if you're going to buy something, where's it going to end up? So it's a long, train of a process, but I think, Rosie, it does help people reconnect with something that I buy does have an effect somewhere else. That connection, like you said, with the whole ecosystem, I think it's a slow process, but I think it does start to happen.
Yeah, it's amazing. We can walk along the beach with a friend and they'll be like, "Oh, this is a clean beach," and I'll say, "Well, we just passed, three plastic bottles. There's half a dozen straws on there," and they didn't notice them because their eyes aren't tuned to looking for them. But once you've been doing it for a while, you can't help but look at what is around us. The idea of a romantic walk along the beach is kind of gone these days because you end up just getting frustrated with all the plastic litter you see along the beaches now.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with you about that. Sometimes I go geocaching. Has anyone on the panel done that before?
Done what?
For the geocaching. So for those of you who don't know about it, geocaching is this game. It's like a scavenger hunt, essentially, and people will give you different types of clues to find a little token that's hidden somewhere, like anywhere in society, really. And then you can write your name and your date to show that you've also found that geocache. But yeah, under lockdown, because it's in my 5 kilometre zone, I went geocaching at St Kilda Beach, but I would think that I've found the item, but actually it's just rubbish. And so it's just like, oh, okay, well, I'm picking up, let's grab these bottles, let's grab these things. It is like quite confronting actually to realize how much it gets wedged into like the rocks and things as well at the beach.
Yeah.
For sure.
I feel like as a counter to the kind of convenience of things, I've heard a lot of people begin to revel in inefficiency. So the efficiency of ordering in or of whatever it is that creates this kind of very convenient waste, then like reclaiming an environmental ethics of being inefficient and anti-productive. And that means doing things slowly or making your own food or not purchasing something that is convenient or whatever it is. So I really like inefficiency as a way of actually being like more maybe ethical for the whole or like the whole ecosystem as opposed to efficient for an individual.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard as well in relation to that, the idea as rest as resistance connected to that too, which is a really beautiful sentiment. Yeah, thank you. So I think to flow with, flowing on from that, so clearly there is, whether we're conscious of it or talking about it, there's clearly a relationship with our stuff that impacts how we purchase or what we purchase, what we're willing to purchase. Tony, would you mind sharing with us what's your relationship with stuff and how has that influenced the line of work that you've gotten into with starting No Skin?
Yeah, great. So my relationship with stuff has been a bit of a strange one. Well, it's probably reflective of what a lot of people experience. On one hand, I come from loving stuff, and I like surrounding myself with things that make me happy. But at the same time, I also in the last few years had a real sort of divergence over and started looking into a lot more of a minimalist lifestyle and things like that as well, which I think is one of the most important things as well, is actually stopping it a little bit more at the source and being a bit more intentional about purchasing, because you'll find your waste reduces massively when you're not then inundated with the stuff that's around you and always feeling you need to declutter and clear stuff out, which can be heartbreaking then with the amount of stuff that you feel that you're throwing away with bags and bags of things. And whilst not single use, you think, did that really provide me the value? But then that's a bit of a strange one, because I then find myself starting a a fashion label, which obviously then produces more of the things that people are buying. And it's how you take some of that minimalist mindset and then incorporate that into starting a business that not only has the actual product being, something that's going into people's homes, but also the whole production process within that as well. So we have to be really mindful about how we're actually doing that. So I think from the top level and where we're actually producing things, it's about being more selective about our materials. Now, obviously, that comes a bit more into the sustainability element than the waste, but using things like hemp materials and recycled cottons is important. It's actually giving more circularity to that otherwise clothing waste. But it's also education along every step of the journey. So I think, like, for our suppliers, when we're having things provided and they want to, give us a pair of jeans or a jacket or something and send that over to us, it's just the absolute standard that would be sent in single plastic wrappings for every single item. And you're ordering hundreds of a product and every single one comes in this plastic bag to then be put into a plastic mailer bag is absolutely devastating, and there is no need at all. There's absolutely no need. And you just say to them, we don't want that. And they're like, are you sure it keeps it safe? And it's like, no, we don't need that. You need to try and educate your suppliers why that's not something that they should be giving as default. And then even down to the way that when things are put onto shipping pallets and things like that, they come plastic wrapped as well, which again doesn't need to happen. You can request paper tape and things to fasten the boxes, and everything arrives safely and everything arrives without issue. So it's actually, incorporating some of that education for your suppliers when you're creating a business, and then all the way through to actually then how you present the product and how you do that. And, there's things for us as well. We have a tagline for our brand, which is for a lifetime, not a season. So we try to have more transseasonal clothing. We don't try to, we certainly want to move away from fast fashion and, things that are just for certain events. And we try and create things that are designed with a more timeless intent, so that a jacket you buy now is something that you can hold on to for 10, 20, 30 years of your life. And for me, that's an important thing because, as I said right at the beginning, I value design and I do like things, and fashion has always been something that I've been passionate about. So I want to be able to have those nice things, but there's a lot more value in having that garment that you love for years than having something that you use for one or two occasions. So there's a lot that comes into it, and sometimes you can feel a little bit internally conflicted when you're trying to reduce waste and you know that you're producing a product or an item. But I think it's brands like us, in a way, or coming in with that mentality, that will actually try and help shift a market away from other companies out there that are just promoting the cheap, quick, almost single-use clothing, which I think is, absolutely devastating. You think of single-use plastics as being one thing, but single-use clothing, which we're on the borderline of having access to, is just awful, especially then when you think of the production and the people behind that as well, and the costs involved.
Oh, 100%. I have to confess, I still remember, like, at age 20, my friends and I deciding on a whim, let's go clubbing, but we didn't have like clothes for it or anything. And literally we just like went into a store, bought like $10 dresses and just wore them for the night, and they were hideous. So we immediately donated them. And it was just like one of these stories like, do you remember that time we drunkenly bought ugly dresses just to go out? Like, it's definitely
it's not uncommon.
And it's so accessible. Like, it's so easy for anyone to decide, I have $6 and I'm just going to quickly buy something. I completely agree with you. I love, Jane, that you've shared how much you've been involved, in essence, with the supply chain and with actually asking the question every step of the way, what do I see as being wasteful here? Or what do I see that needs improvement? So can you share a little bit more about how you did that? Like, was it actually you sitting down and creating the process of how does something get made and then working that through, or?
Partly, and part of it as well is, I run this business with a couple of co-founders as well, and the actual logistics and the end-to-end is not something that any of us had exposure to. So that's something you find out. You find out that you have to create things, when you're doing larger scale production, packing briefs for your suppliers. So you send them, this is the kind of the way we want it shipped, the way we want it handled. And then that's when they come back and they'll say, okay, so we assume then that you want it, for example, packaged in the individual plastic wraps. And then it comes down as well to all the little bits and pieces. And look, we're certainly not perfect. We're a new brand, we're a self-funded company, and often things can be more expensive to do them the right way, and that gets reflected in the cost of garments, which is why buying once and buying well is not cheap. That does have to all be rolled up, but even the tags and things that go onto the garments, they're often done then with polyester strings or things like that go onto it, instead of having more organic or biodegradable materials. And it's just every step of the way you've got to think about these things, because realistically as well, as a brand who are producing things and having stuff, there's still an awful lot of waste. There is still a lot of stuff that comes out of our warehouse, comes out of our office. On the more micro day-to-day scale, we're a paperless office. I come from a world of digital. There's no need to be, churning out reams of paper. We have, when we do our packaging then onto the consumer, we use biodegradable mailer bags. We use biodegradable tape for anything that needs to be taped. And, we limit as well the amount of stuff that we put inside. So it comes all the way through from the beginning of the supply chain onto how we then pass it onto a customer. But it's unavoidable in some respects to get that waste, but it's just about asking the questions of the supplier at each stage about what their intent is, rather than waiting for something to arrive and then realizing that, it's completely wrapped in plastic wrap or something like that.
I love your choice of the word intent there. I think it's really, from listening to your podcast, it's really clear to me there is so much intention behind everything you do, and even your process of sharing that to help other people consider how to be more purposeful with their business. Sorry, I've just realized I'm like totally hogging the question asking. Does anyone else want to chime in?
No, doing well, Rosie, carry on.
Well, I have had to learn that sometimes I ask questions way faster than what other people, and if I just gave people a minute, they would actually ask for me. So I just wanted to check in. So,
Sorry. I think something that Tony just said, like, you've got to ask people not to put the package, not to do this kind of packaging, and that you don't need this and that. I think that's just something that I've just resonated with me. Like, I think as a business, but also as a consumer, just someone who doesn't have a business, if someone's not taking those kinds of ways, like, maybe we need to just be asking more questions. Like, I think people get really nervous on a day-to-day basis saying, to their local grocer, hey, why is the organic produce wrapped in plastic? Or why is it in its own little packet? Like, we need to be asking more questions and, asking them if they can just, why are you doing this? I'd prefer it not being like this, because it's not until people ask that people change. And I think, a lot of the broader community, they don't do this, and they're not going to do it unless the consumer asks for it. So this is something that I do, and I think it's really important, like, not just as a business. I know, Tony's asked that of other businesses and whatnot, and I do that also, but I think it's down to the individual person to start asking questions more, and not be scared to kind of to be seem like one of those type of people, but just doing it in a beautiful manner.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And the thing is as well, there are, as I say, oh, sorry, Charlotte.
No, go. Sorry.
Sorry, I think it was a little bit of lag. But yeah, we also, as I say, we don't profess to be perfect. And there are some people out there who are more educated on the matter, or have, better knowledge about things than we do. And if we get if we get an email from someone saying, I love my product, hopefully they did, hopefully they enjoyed what they bought. But, have you considered this, or have you considered that? Then we're not going to take offense to that. That's not a problem for us. That helps us take a simple step to be better as well. And most of the time it is simple steps. So yeah, like, be open with your feedback to companies. If they are doing things with the right intention, if they have got good values underlying as well, they'll actually be grateful to receive the feedback, because sometimes you just can't see the things that are right in front of you because you're dealing with so much all of the time as well.
100%.
Yeah, and I think what you've both raised there is something really important for us to remember as well, is that no one ever has perfect knowledge. Like I think in that question, in that thing of like, how come we don't ask questions, there's often this assumption that like, well, whoever designed it or whoever's working at the top of, a supermarket or a particular company, like they clearly must obviously have this very like expert team who have decided the best outcome, and that's why it is the way it is. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just that, like you say, like no one's asked the question, so no one knew like maybe we should include this as part of a process that could be improved. Yeah.
I love
Sorry,
constructive feedback. So it's a big thing, I think, of how we can push to try and change.
Definitely.
We find that in a company I run, we find that there's so many layers of bureaucracy to get through to talk to people. You've got suppliers who have suppliers who have suppliers, and you've got courier companies, and all those people are using disposable plastic because it's easy and convenient for them. And just to get one product in through your shop, process it and ship it out, you might be talking to 4 or 5 different suppliers along the way, and you've got to remind each of them politely, like, hey, I don't need that in that bag, or can you not wrap that in bubble wrap, or we're not putting it in a satchel for these reasons. We've packed the box with waste cardboard rather than polystyrene. And it's really a big effort because society has gotten so entrenched with using plastic as an easy way to do things, and fast and simple, and it's very cheap, and it's it serves a lot of really good purposes, but at the end of the day, we don't really need it, and we can do without it, but you really got to work at it on multiple layers.
True.
Yeah. And I think actually, Ross, in you sharing that, I think what it should also remind us is when we do see someone doing it well, to also give that positive feedback, because whoever instigated that has probably been working at it for 6 months, and it was probably an uphill battle, start to finish. And so to get that feedback, it allows the team to know it was worth it. For example, like what you were just saying about the waste postage. Recently, I got something delivered to me in a box that wasn't branded, like the right brand. It was, but there was a note on it that said, we use just boxes that we find rather than new ones as our way to reduce. And I think that, taking the time to email that company back to say thanks for doing that, because it meant that's one less waste item for us too. It's encouraging, and it's it really validates the work that's been put into that. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to my next question then. Since we're on the topic of business. Charlotte, at Bob, do you think that your clients are coming to you specifically because they are trying to be more environmentally conscious? Or is it that it's because your salon is gorgeous and people?
Look, I think it's everything, but I think at the end of the day, from the research I've done, and from every time someone calls as a new client, we always ask how they found the salon. Are they local? Is it through social media? Is it through Google search, and why? And yes, a good portion of Bob's clients do come because they're seeking a sustainable salon. They want a salon, like, first and foremost, that's reputable, that will give a beautiful cut and color. Obviously, that's essential. But once they've got past that and realize they're going to get that, they start looking for more details. So, a sustainable salon is just becoming a thing now. Like, I for the life of me can't understand why there's not more people doing it. And toxic free, I think there's a huge push towards that. So if you're going to go and get a haircut and a color somewhere good, why not just go to a sustainable salon versus someone that's not a sustainable salon? To me, that's a given. So I do think that it's part of the search process when people are coming to us. And as far as referrals, it's, there's a salon around the corner that's, that's really good, but, there's zero waste and it's toxic free. So yes, and essentially I do think that the majority of our clients are looking for that, because especially with what's going on in the world, people are having to make more mindful decisions, and it just comes down to each and every person to do that. And hopefully once there's more demand for it, more salons will roll on with this, and it'll just become the norm.
Do you get many salon owners calling you to ask, how do I make my salon more like sustainable like yours? Or
no. Look, to be honest, I think we use a company called Sustainable Salons. So we have set up with them, so the way they work is we pay like a weekly fee, and they supply us with big bins. So 4 different bins, 1 for paper, 1 for metal, 1 for plastic, 1 for hair. We get a chemical bucket, and then a box to put like glass and stuff in. And basically we have our own wheelie bin, or 2 wheelie bins actually, and they come every 2 weeks and grab that, and everything gets sorted at a centre. So basically they take 95% of our salon waste. The other 5% is food waste, which we do personally because they can't do that, and we just have a bokashi bin, which is a composting system. So look, I think they are sufficiently out there that salons would know that it's out there. So it's up to the salon to make the decision to go out and take that on board, I suppose. It's super easy. And to be honest, we offset the cost with the client, which is what every salon does. So technically it's not costing the business anything. Each person has a $2 or $3 green fee on top of their service. No one's ever, commented on that. And that's just to make the client realize that they are making an impact themselves. It's not just the business. So it's a pretty thought out process, and I think that it's pretty easy to just jump on board and do it. And they come in and train you and get you up to scratch with what you need to do. So I don't get a lot of business owners approaching me with that, because it's there. As far as toxic free, that's still slow moving in the hairdressing industry, unfortunately. I think a lot of hair salons are still under the assumption that it doesn't work as well, which is obviously not a thing. But I think that the hairdressing industry, there's just not as much education as there probably should be with that kind of thing. I know that with the training school that we have our apprentices at, that they are starting to teach sustainability as part of the curriculum within that academy, which is amazing. This was definitely not a thing back in my day. So fundamentally it's shifting, as you're learning, you're not having to change when you're, at a salon. So I think there is a slow shift towards it, but it's kind of a step that you need to want to take, and you go and find it yourself. I don't feel that salon owners are sharing that amongst themselves, unless it's part of the way we kind of post and market it, of being a sustainable salon. People go, oh, okay, that might be quite a good idea, and then they go off and do it themselves. Sorry, that was a really long answer to get to that, but yeah, I think that salons are shifting slowly.
yeah, I really love. I personally think that $2 to $3 cost you pay, it's not so different from a carbon offset, is it? And it is a good reminder that there is a cost. There is a cost to even something like getting your hair cut. It's not that it was like cut, colored, and washed, and boom, like this, it all just disappeared. And I think that really reminds me of like what Ross and Ramona, you were talking about the convenience for whom. And with this question about toxic products, and but will the outcome be as good for my hair if I had like a less toxic hair color? Like, I think what that made me think about is when we're talking about waste, we're always thinking it's physical. We're thinking it's going to be a plastic item floating in the ocean. But what you're drawing on here is that it's a toxic waste that we can't see, but it's in our water, and we impact that as well.
Yeah.
So I think it's amazing that you have found a way to reduce that toxicity. Do you mind sharing how that works?
In terms of what form are you talking about, the chemicals?
Yeah, like how have you done something so like powerful that like what is common in other hair salons is not happening at yours?
I think, I mean, I go back to sustainable salons because they're the reason we can do this. Essentially, it would be impossible to do it without them. You know, we have these chemical buckets because obviously we go through a bucket ton of color and there is wastage. We overmix, you know, it oxidizes. We have to normally throw it down the sink. That's what every hairdresser does. It has to go somewhere. It doesn't go into a bin. So these go into chemical buckets, and then the chemical bucket gets picked up when you opt for it. It takes a while to load up. And then that gets made into water. So they take the chemical buckets away, break it down to water, and then it gets sent out to the building and construction industry to get repurposed. So I think every facet of sustainable salons, each bin has a specific recycling form. So down to the hair, you know, people would think, well, hair, whatever. That gets made into booms, which is, I suppose, like a big sausage thing in a stocking. It's basically a stocking filled with hair that soaks up oil spills that have either, you know, happened on land or in the ocean. And I just think that's huge. I mean, we're using something that traditionally would just go in an ordinary bin like hair, and you're repurposing it, and they're finding more and more ways to repurpose it. They're making like doormats and things out of this hair. They're soaking up oil spills. You know, it's pretty mad what they're doing. And then with the money, they're, you know, giving back to the community with Oz Harvest and other things like that. So I think it's kind of like a circular economy, really. It's pretty incredible. So I think that's just one small part of Bob, is sustainable salons system of where we can recycle efficiently, and it just reduces the impact on the planet, you know, in a way that we would never traditionally be able to do. You know, foil alone is, I've forgotten what the number is, but it's ludicrous how much foil, like aluminium foil, sits in landfill per year just in Australia alone. And, you know, keeping out foil, which is just never going to break down, that gets melted down and remade into aluminium products. Like, yeah, I could talk about this all day, but I think that's just one facet of the business. It's just I wish they would do it in lots of other businesses, not just hair salons. But, you know, I think it's just one thing at a time, really.
If I could jump in here, Rosie, I think the question you were referring to was the bigger part of people aren't paying the real cost of a product. You know, you get a service and then you pay for the service and everybody thinks they're done, but there's always the follow-on from it. You know, you buy a plastic container, you know, for 10 cents, but then you throw it away. But that cost still continues to occur. You know, I think in New York, they were finding back when they had plastic bags that it was costing them 50 cents, costing the local government 50 cents for every plastic bag given out because of the time they spent in trying to retrieve them out of trees and drains and the oceans around there. And so there's this concept which is growing a bit of momentum and finding a bit of resistance in Australia, unfortunately, but called extended producer responsibility, where the manufacturers or suppliers of this product are actually having to pay a fee up front for the what they call the backside of a product, how to, you know, make sure when it's disposed of, it's disposed properly where it's not loose in the environment or causing any further external costs. And if we can bring that in around the world, and there's in Europe, there's a fairly decent push for that now. And I think we'll then start this. We won't have these, like Charlotte was talking, a $3 green fee, because everybody will be expecting to pay, you know, the real cost of a product or a service up front. You know, maybe 10 years time, we'll be having quite a different conversation on that, because there seems to be more and more discussion on this concept of producers paying a fee. like in Australia, we're bringing in a container deposit scheme where the bottling companies pay 10 cents up front, and then the consumer, when they hand that bottle back, they'll get their 10 cents back. But that's a real good example of the producers paying a fee up front to account for its the disposal or the recovery of the product, where it can be reused for something else again.
Oh,
I think
100%.
you mentioned. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you go.
Yeah, you were mentioning, Charlotte, about the the reuse that they're finding for hair, like for clean up oil spills and that kind of thing. The minute we place value on something and we find another use for it, then people treat it very differently.
Yeah.
If people
100%.
don't think it has any value, then they're not going to pay much attention to it. But if we can, like you say, educate people that, look, this does get reused, and they're finding new uses for it, which is fantastic. It creates value, and then we all pay attention, because very rarely do we find smartphones on the beach as litter, or $100 notes, or anything like that. We find things that people think have no value for the most part.
Like on the container deposit scheme, right now, we only recycle about 15 to 20% of plastic bottles. But once we put 10 cents on them, within a few months, that'll go to over 80%, just for 10 cents. It's an amazing change that happens, and it replicates whenever anybody around the world does this. It's such a simple change. We just put a little bit of value on it, and it might not be 10 cents, may not matter much to me or someone else, but a little high school kid or a primary school kid running around the yard will go find it. They want to go buy some candy or something, or a lot of people are supplementing their incomes to the tune of $20,000-$30,000 a year by picking up bottles in Adelaide. So it makes a big difference when we get people to, like Ramona said, put a value on it, and all of a sudden it becomes a resource, not a waste product.
100%. And I think that's the beauty of a circular economy approach, is that because you want to be reusing everything for different reasons or industry, it all has value again. Just because it didn't have value for one person doesn't mean it's not valuable to someone else or another industry. I remember learning about that last year in ecological economics. Like, there are some companies where one person's waste is actually not a waste. It's actually then delivered to another company because it's really useful to them. And it's incredible. And it's a really great indicator, it's evidence as well that we've probably been less connected to each other than we could have been. And in having that, these broader conversations across industry, that's when we realize, pairing up with you means we both benefit. And then the impacts that can have as well. Yeah. I think, so I just wanted to make one last comment, Charlotte, is that what I've loved about learning more and more about Bob is that even something that sounds like it should be simple, I'm just getting a haircut, it actually has, again, so many processes, so many steps behind and before I've even arrived. And the passion that you bring into something like hairdressing helps us realize, even that choice of what my haircut is for the year, or depending how often you cut your hair, even that is actually making a huge impact and a huge change. So thank you for sharing all of those things. It's a lot to think about. Yeah. And last but not least, Kate. So Kate, you've been in the middle of writing, finishing your thesis, which I've been having the great pleasure of reading through. So thank you so much for sharing. There was a particular quote in it that I really loved, that I'm just going to share with everyone else, because I realize your thesis is not ready it's not open to the public yet. But this is a quote from one of your participants in your research, which is, I imagine when the apocalypse comes and I'm like, wow, if you're all men who only knew how to do efficiency things, I know how to make my own clothes and grow my own food. So you're not on my team when the apocalypse comes, and you're probably going to die. We laugh together.
Yeah, that was beautiful imagery.
I wanted to ask you, like, I think that this is an aspect that we probably don't hear as much yet in the mainstream. Like, do you think that there is a gendered aspect to our consumptive habits? And if there is, do you think that this gendered aspect impacts how we relate to things and how we will actually respond to reducing our consumption?
Yes, okay, I'll do my best. They're big questions. So I think all identity is interconnected with stuff. And like our emotions are interconnected with stuff. Stuff impact us. They make us feel things in the way that Ross and Ramona, in seeing plastic, your emotions change. You feel upset. Things are impacting us. They're lively and they're really potent they're not just inanimate objects, let's say. And in our relationship with things like plastic, the beach changes, or how we relate to a beach and that landscape changes. And as you said, Ross, it's no longer romantic, but it is filled with obstacles and stress and upset. So I think all identity is interconnected with things. And so gender as like a performance of part of our identity is interconnected with things. And I guess it's how it's interconnected. So a lot of my participants who were feminists and were feminine, they were kind of pushing back on this early 2000s understanding of femininity as hyperconsumptive, trashy, needing consciousness raising, catering to the male gaze, very wasteful, very single use, which, I think emerged in the early 2000s. And so they were kind of pushing back on that understanding of feminine consumption as not only anti-feminist, because it's catering to the male gaze, but also as something that is anti-environmental in its wastefulness and its hyperconsumptiveness. And two people in particular were using things to not only change what femininity means. So like Imogen, who you read a quote from, she brought with her to the group a pair of pants that she had tailor-made from remnant fabric. And she spoke about femininity as having the skills to care for herself. And that was through sewing and through being able to kind of rely on herself to support her everyday needs: food, clothing, shelter. And she also spoke about it in terms of these are pants. I'm a very feminine person, but pants aren't typically understood as feminine. And maybe I operate in a setting where it's expected of me that I'm very girly. And yes, I am, but no, I'm not. And so she changed what femininity meant with things. And these pants changed her understanding of femininity in their creation, if that makes sense. And she built the skills to be able to be feminine in an environmental way and in a way that's what is femininity? I disagree with the fact that it needs to be pink. And so she did all of that in a way that was environmental and feminist. So her gendered consumption was about reclaiming both of those things. So femininity in relation to feminism and environmentalism, which I was just in love with. And she talks about this apocalypse where she's because she lives an inefficient life where she doesn't rely on others to kind of support her. She's I know what I'm doing. I will survive the apocalypse. I did a good degree in horticulture and I know how to make my own clothes. And those are things that are typically kind of looked down upon. And she thought that was really powerful. And then Sunday, another participant, she talked about having 13 pairs of essentially the same pants. And she was I know it's really bad and I should stop op shopping for the same pants, or seeing a pair I love in the US and they get here and they're too big, so I have to get them tailored because I feel so much guilt about sending them back and all of that mileage. But these pants had like emerged for her as a way of comforting her appearance when she had alopecia, so was losing her hair, where she couldn't find comfort in her body as something that it was feminine, but it seemed quite powerless. And she came from a history of debutante balls and all of that, where femininity is incredibly prescribed. And she was like, I like femininity and I think I'm feminine, but that stuff is not fun. That's not powerful. That's the femininity that I'm given by kind of heterosexual patriarchy, and I'm not super into that. But with these pants, she was like, they were like a corduroy 3/4 length cuffed pants that were high-waisted. And she sent me a photo of 13 pairs of these pants. And I was like, Jesus, Sunday. And she was like, I know I need to get I need to get a handle on this stuff. But in our conversation, she really felt the pull of these pants. And she talked about not only how they enable her to feel feminine and powerful, but also how she just can't throw them away. She said she's moved house 6 times in the past 2 years. And of everything she owns, these are 13 things she cannot get rid of. And I thought that was a really lovely example of, yes, she's overconsumptive, but she feels these things, and she feels how they are super important to her life. And that means that they cannot be waste. And I thought that was like an interesting tension in the fact that we're like, don't buy stuff. And then it's like, yes, Sunday understands that fully. But when she has this stuff that is really central to her kind of gender and her comfort in her body and being differently feminine in a powerful way, the pants kind of took on this wastelessness. They couldn't be wasted. And she was committed to tailoring them, committed to keeping them for years. Whereas she spoke about lots of other things that could easily be thrown away or passed on to other people. So yeah, in my research, gender or femininity was simultaneously they were using things to change gender and what femininity means. And they were, in doing so, things became really important and really environmental, or thought about environmentally. And I think more generally, if we understand things, like if I understand a pair of pants as helping kind of create me and give me emotions, my responsibility to those pants changes. Like in the same way that Ross and Ramona, you noticing and feeling upset about plastic, your responsibility to plastic or to the thing changes. And so if we understand stuff and like the things that can't speak as lively and as potent, then we can't be as kind of ruthless towards them and as reckless. Yeah. Sorry, that was really long, but I hope that made sense for everyone.
Okay, that's gorgeous. And it reminds me a lot of what, Tony, you're talking about in terms of, buying once and buying well. Like, yes, there might be 13 pairs of them, but they're all loved. It's not that she's got, this is pair of pant number 1 and these are my least liked. They're all equally loved, which is why none of them have been given away or thrown away. And I think that Sunday's story about why these pants are so important it's a good reminder for all of us that yes, we might be on zero waste journeys, but it doesn't mean that everything around us has now become useless or pointless, or that the goal is to want nothing, but it's to know with real intent and purpose what are the things we actually which things are the things we should actually or want to actually have around us. There were 2 words that you brought up that really resonated with me, which was when you were talking about the performativity of gender and the way that our gender can be prescribed to us, because often that is what's actually spurring the consumption more than our actual personal desires, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, like your story about going clubbing one night, you did what was required of you or expected of you. You followed the script for that evening and you bought a hot dress and you went out, then you threw it away. And that's what's kind of asked of you. That's the script you're given to follow. So well done. You did well.
A+.
A+. But yeah, it's incredibly harmful. And I think it's really tiring that femininity is still branded as both anti-feminist and anti-environmental. When like we all require clothing, and like masculinity has its like je ne sais quoi in how you have to consume. But yeah, it's definitely it's less fast fashion hyper-consumptive, and fast fashion is the real like bush with like public discourse at the moment. Oh, one thing, Imogen also, she talked about how fast fashion as like a way of disconnecting, her creation of pants as a way of disconnecting from fast fashion. And fast fashion obviously employs a lot of kind of underpaid, sweated labor that happens to be, they happen to be women as well. So she talked about it feminist in terms of supply chain. And I thought it was really cool how she re-envisioned the role of a seamstress as caring and skillful and all of that, and thoughtful, and understanding the dynamics of a material in this really intricate way. And so re-envisioning the seamstress as someone that has all of that potential and isn't sweated labor that is underpaid and it's an easy job, but as this really beautiful thing that can let you fucking survive in an apocalypse. So yeah, I thought that was really lovely as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Kate. Oh, yeah, I mean, if you feel like self-publishing over the lockdown, honestly, your thesis needs to be more readily available. All right, I'm actually mindful of the time. I guess we've got 10 minutes left for questions. So I suppose we should open it to the comments that we've received so far. Would that be the correct thing to do?
I think I would really love to keep going. I'm actually loving this conversation and I think it's really, really insightful. But we're going to have to wrap it up. So if we can just have a couple of moment things, that would be great, Rosie.
Sorry, a couple of what?
Just wrap it up now. Look, I might just thank everyone for their time. We've got some waste Q&A coming on and a few things. So thank you to Charlotte, Ross and Ramona, Kate, Tony. Really appreciate what you've had to say. There's been a lot of comments coming through. We probably can't bring them all up now, but if you've got some time afterwards, it'd be great if you can jump into the comments and just reply to some of them if you like. People are guilty of throwing out too many clothes and donating clothes. It's great intention. But that's just the way it goes. So thank you all for your time. And we're going to move on to our waste panel with the council. And I've got a young ambassador as well too. Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.